So with 28 Years Later coming out this weekend, I decided to do my homework and catch up on the rest of the series from 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. So I literally just a few minutes ago finished watching the first entry, 28 Days Later. Some of you guys have been suggesting this to me for a while, and I went back and forth with it because usually zombie apocalypse stuff isn't really for me except for The Last of Us game and show. But given how much it's resonated with certain people, I thought, why not? So if you somehow have never seen this movie, you don't know what the plot is, or if you don't care about spoilers, well, I gave you the warning. The film stars Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, Brendan Gleeson, and Christopher Eccleston. Directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, both of whom have gone on to do various commendable works throughout their careers. Recently, Alex Garland did Warfare and Civil War, and Danny Boyle went on to win various Oscars for Slumdog Millionaire. The plot is what we'd expect to see in a zombie apocalypse like this. A certain infection breaks out, infecting people, causing it to spread all over society, wiping out society as a whole and most of mankind. I've seen posters for 28 Days Later online, and I debated about whether or not I would check it out, but I wasn't really interested. For some reason, I just never got around to it, even with my interest in The Last of Us over the last decade or so. It still kind of flew under my radar, and I never really bothered to look into it. I'm kind of amazed that I didn't even realize that Cillian Murphy was in this one. He's not only famous for Scarecrow in the Dark Knight trilogy by Chris Nolan, Inception, but is also an Oscar winner for Oppenheimer, which he won a couple years back. Bear with me, my thoughts are kind of all over the place. I had a really rough couple of nights, didn't really get a whole lot of sleep, so if I seem a little jumbled and delirious, that's why. I'm just gonna get right into it. 28 Days Later is really good. I'm not just saying that to go along with the current, I really do mean that. It's very simple, yet effective. I can easily see how this is considered a classic in the zombie horror genre, with some entries like Walking Dead, The Last of Us, I Am Legend, which I guess maybe isn't nearly as highly regarded as some of the other entries in that genre. TV show and movies, I know, but still, same logic kind of applies. Zombie apocalypse stories, if you know what I mean. So a virus that infects monkeys breaks out when a group of people break into this lab, but the scientist tries to warn them that there's a virus that's infecting them and it's extremely contagious. One of them gets bit, and she immediately infects the other people in the room. And we have our movie where we see our main character, Jim, played by Cillian Murphy, waking up in a hospital. Not just the building, but the whole city of London's completely abandoned. Except when he goes to this one church where he sees all these dead bodies lying on the pews and discovers that there's certain zombies lurking around, and almost gets killed by one of them. Basically, Jim is the audience character. He's meant to guide us in this really crazy situation. We're obviously going to ask the same questions that he would be asking. What exactly happened here? What happened to humankind, and what's going on with these people that are infected? Then he runs into two survivors, one of them played by Naomi Harris, who managed to help him survive by the skin of his teeth when he's confronted by these infected. They tell him their side of what happened and how the infection started to spread throughout the world, or at least that's what they've been hearing from other people that they ran into, and also maybe radio broadcasts that they would listen to. There's not really a whole lot of deep character study in this one. Like I said earlier, it's a very simple plot, getting from point A to B, avoiding any nearby infected. We do get some nice character moments, like with Jim bonding with Selena, and there's a sort of romantic attraction that's starting to blossom. Then they run into Brendan Gleeson's character, who is a survivor in this tall apartment building with his daughter Hannah, providing him the shelter that they need, but eventually they come across this radio broadcast where they have to go to this one area outside of Manchester, England, to look for any signs of military support. Selena obviously is not too thrilled about that notion, but they decide to go anyway, rather than just staying here waiting for their inevitable fate, whether it's their own natural causes or an infected breaking in and killing them. You're probably going to hear me compare this movie to The Last of Us in some ways because as the movie was playing out, I couldn't help but notice some similar tropes that occurred. I mean, obviously the zombie apocalyptic genre is no stranger to those things, but given that The Last of Us is basically my baseline for a story like this, I couldn't help but notice any similarities. So if you hear me mention them throughout, that's why. Certain moments that I couldn't help but see similarities to, Selena very much reminds me of Bill. Bill is very cut off from people and doesn't want to let anybody in, but her bond and romantic attraction to Jim ultimately helps her break down those barriers. Mostly common in the TV show rendition of Bill in the episode Long Time, with his bond with Frank helping him become more open to people, at least in the ways that he's able to. And the death of Brendan Gleeson's character Frank when he's infected by a drop of blood that he sees from a dead body on top of this girder, as soon as a drop of blood came down into his face, my heart literally started fluttering. Very reminiscent in my estimation of Tess. And then she goes out in a blaze of glory, so to speak. Although in this case, Frank gets shot by other soldiers that are nearby. I mean, Tess has that thing happen to her as well in the game, but in the show, yeah, it's a different story. In my estimation, I would say that Jim is a very compassionate and caring person. I mean, if there's ever any doubt about Cillian Murphy, I don't know what else to tell you. Certain subtle moments with him where he remembers certain memories of his parents when he goes to see their dead bodies in their house. Again, very similar to what happens with Bill and Frank in the TV show of The Last of Us. Even with the strong opposition from Selena and her one friend not wanting to take any unnecessary risks. Unfortunately, they do get the attention of the infected nearby, and Selena's one friend gets infected. Not even 2 seconds. She kills him instantly. Big thing with this virus, rather than taking a day or so to turn, you turn into one of these monsters within a matter of seconds. Horrifying as the infected are in The Last of Us, this one, as far as how fast you can go, definitely takes the cake. But as I said with Jim being very compassionate and caring, maintains a certain sense of hope that everything's going to get better despite all the evidence to the contrary. I mean, it's very easy for somebody like that to be dismissed as too naive and too hopeful, but somebody has to. Otherwise, what's the point of going on? But then after Frank is infected and killed, the group of soldiers take him to this nearby mansion where everything seems to be hunky-dory. Their leader is Major West, played by Christopher Eccleston, who you might remember as the Dark Elf from Thor: The Dark World. No, actually, you probably wouldn't remember that. But I think he's most notable for Doctor Who, at least one of the iterations of Doctor Who. I don't know. Presents as a very straightforward and caring and stern yet protective person all at once. But clearly, along with those two looks what those soldiers give, something is clearly not right with him. As it turns out, that radio broadcast they were giving out, they wanted women to come into their groups so they can procreate and in their own ways preserve the human race. Even if it's against their will. Different type of group, yes, but very similar to David and his group of cannibals when Ellie discovers what they're doing. Just like any good apocalyptic story, you get people desperate enough, they'll do just about anything. And there's a lot of moments too that I could talk about, like how the soldiers discuss the notion that humankind has been around really in a few blinks of an eye in the grand scheme of things, and how the whole world hasn't really fully adjusted to the human race, and that maybe this is a return to normalcy with humankind being mostly wiped out. And Frank seeing the group of horses riding off into the meadow nearby, and they're all just taking in this sense of awe and wonder, just like Joel and Ellie did with the giraffes outside of Salt Lake City, showing us that life does go on, and maybe this world is indeed worth saving. And with this being said, in the apocalypse, you can't not have any blood and gore. There's plenty of that to go around in this one, and I would say it's even more gruesome than The Last of Us. Probably on a similar level with Walking Dead, although maybe not as extreme. I haven't really gotten that far into Walking Dead, so I can only go by what I saw a little bit of the first season, but I didn't get that far into it past that. But the fact that, well, I'm not going to go into any of that graphic detail, but when you get infected with saliva or the blood, if it gets into certain areas where you could ingest it, that's gonna do just fine with the scare factor. And the direction from Danny Boyle is very erratic and chaotic, but also feels mostly like a found footage movie, at least something filmed on a CCTV camera. Because this film almost looks like it came out in the 1970s or the 1980s, or even at some point in the mid-1990s. It has a very niche art house type of feel to it. There's also a few Dutch angles that I picked up on, like when Major West shows their one guy who turns into a zombie and they have him on a chain. Very similar to this one section of Last of Us Part 2, when Ellie runs into the group of rattlers and they have an infected who was one of their own, they chain him up as well for sport. And when Jim eventually lets him loose, you could do the same thing that Ellie does in Last of Us Part 2. It does kind of come in handy to throw a foil into certain things, but it has a very erratic feel as well. There's certain moments where it has a POV shot from the perspective of the infected as they're running towards their prey, and it only happens for like maybe a brief flash of like 2 seconds, maybe even 1, but it's a way of telling the audience that there's danger coming. Even if you don't always hear sounds nearby, there's always that looming threat in the distance that any time the infected could show up. But eventually Jim manages to save Selena and Hannah, and they make their way to this remote area somewhere in the countryside. I gotta tell you, for a good amount of time, I was on the edge of my seat for most of that climax. From him escaping execution, to breaking in, the soldiers getting infected, him letting loose that one infected in the building, Selena and Hannah in their own ways fighting their way out. It's chaotic and erratic in all the right ways. I also have to mention the writing by Alex Garland, who requires these characters to do and say certain things that you and I probably would never be able to picture ourselves in certain situations if we would be able to do or say those things. Just like any good apocalypse story, it puts characters in certain positions that make us wonder, how would we act if we were in that position? As far as myself, I don't know if I'd be able to do some of that stuff. Because Jim adapts pretty quickly to the situation after a certain point in time. Like when they stop to get fuel from this big tanker truck, he goes inside this nearby building to look for food, but then he sees a young kid who's infected, and without hesitation, defends himself. And after maybe 10 seconds of determining so, kills him with little to no question. And because of Selena and Hannah being part of his group, so to speak, God help anybody else who gets in their way. When you strip down and get rid of all the societal norms, tribalism goes in full force in the apocalypse. Nobody's a hero nor a villain. They're just survivors. And I like how the movie ends kind of ambiguously. They're in this one remote area in the countryside and they create this sign that says hello with this Royal Air Force jet flying overhead to try to get its attention. Usually other films would be tempted to show that there was some indication that the pilot did see them and that help would be on the way. There's really no clear answer, but Jim still maintains a sense of hope that the pilot did see them. 28 Days Later is definitely a banger. I mean, I don't know if I would call it my favorite in the genre, but if you're into film in general or the zombie apocalypse in particular, it is definitely worth checking out. And I can easily understand why this has resonated with so many people for over 20 years. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. If you like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for my review of 28 Weeks Later coming up soon, along with my review of 28 Years Later. I'm not going to be able to get it up in time before Friday or Saturday. At some point within the next week, I'm going to see 28 Years Later and get a review out for you guys. So just bear with me as I try to get all this crammed in as tightly as possible. So thanks again, guys, for watching. I'll see you in the next one.